I had the opportunity recently to read an essay that was by Anonymous. It was called Compartmentalization, or Some Thoughts on Boxes. And I kept finding things I liked about it. I liked the title. I liked the opening image, which was about Daphne, of mythological fame, the one who turned into a tree. And I liked the way the essay kept opening, like nesting boxes. It kept opening up, and I found that it deepened with every read, and I found it also bore rereading. And I was not surprised when I found out that its author was a published poet, and her name is Katie Bellamy Mitchell, and she is here tonight. Katie Bellamy Mitchell grew up in Old Town, Alexandria, Virginia. She's a PhD student in the Committee on Social Thought here at the University of Chicago, where she is researching the literary and political history of apologies and apologetic forms, which I would read. She was the recipient of a fellowship from the Bucknell Seminar for Younger Poets, and her poetry and essays have appeared in 6x8 Press, Gulf Coast, and Prodigal. I was amazed that her name came up at an email from a friend who has gotten back in touch with me after 30 years, with whom I studied classical Greek at Columbia, and who now turns out to be a visiting professor on the Committee on Social Thought. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with all these University of Chicago tropes. And she knows Katie. Katie is a student of hers. So this is another, I think it's a convergence. It's not a coincidence. And I'm here to introduce you to a new voice, Katie Bellamy Mitchell, who I hope will read to us from her essay, her award-winning essay. Katie?
Thank you. I have to confess, so this essay started about two pieces of artwork that were in the Smart Gallery, and I'm going to speak about them as if they are still on the walls at the Smart Gallery, but they are not. So you'll just have to imagine. Forgive the present tense. Two sides of what used to be one wooden box hang on the walls of the Smart Gallery. At first glance, they are unremarkable, vaguely Italian-looking landscapes populated by two vaguely Italian-looking lovers, all flowing Renaissance hair and slit silk. In the panel on the left, a woman lies strewn improbably across some rocky ground. Maybe she's sleeping, or maybe she's dead. And a man leans on his staff and peers over her with a neutral expression. In the panel on the right, in front of a section of silver sea, that same woman stands apart from the man who is reaching towards her. His mouth is open. Her hands cross upwards into two woody stems and blossom into the unmistakable broccoli floret silhouette of a tree. Daphne, turning into a laurel to escape the god Apollo. These paintings were once opposing panels of a Florentine cassone, an ornate 15th century trunk commissioned to carry the dowry of a bride to her new home, where the trunk would remain as a luxury furnishing. Though the stories on these boxes often contained a lesson or a moral for the newlyweds, the moral imparted by this myth and this box is ambiguous, at least. As Ovid tells it, Apollo insults the god Eros, who takes his revenge by making Apollo fall in love with Daphne, whom he has enchanted to detest the company of men. She runs until exhausted. She pleads to be changed so that Apollo no longer desires her. Her father, the river god, complies by turning her into the first laurel tree, whose branches Apollo will wreath into a crown. The master of these particular paintings includes none of the spectacle of the interpretation of the myth by Piero or Antonio del Pollaiolo, where Daphne is lifted into the air by branches that burst from her shoulders like wings and bristle darkly over 2/3 of the canvas. There is none of that later Baroque melodrama of Bernini's statue, where Daphne turns towards Apollo in terror as her torso hardens, her hair tangles into vines, and her toenails lengthen into roots. The Daphne of this cassone looks so certain, stands so still. She raises her hands, elbows at right angles, as if to pull a curtain down. This Daphne is not transforming, she is disappearing. We catch her in the process of becoming a bit of background. Her dress billows up the same pale blue as the sails of the ship and the waves on the sea. The frame crops her lengthening hands as one might crop an unimportant edge of landscape. This is not an Ars Poetica where Apollo folds a woman into the leaves of a poem. This is familiar. The escape offered by this transformation is something that Daphne already knows how to do. She raises her hands and becomes an object, a material for reproducing other objects, a decoration, a forest, a story. Her virginity remains a closed and infinitely valuable commodity. This brings us to the box itself. A box is a human intervention into space. Boxes are deliberate, all stress and pull, flat planes of wood or metal or cardboard pinned and held apart. Break a box open and the air shivers. There is an absence then where there was an interior. These panels transferred onto canvas seem joined by the ache of keeping a room open. I imagined this box when it was whole being filled for a bride. Her mother and the other women in the household packing it with fabric, clothing, currency, all they could give her for the transition from daughter to wife to mother. Perhaps the legend on this box was neither an admonishment to chastity or to obedience, but a quieter sort of gift. It is possible this object seems to promise to survive whatever may happen, even the translation from an individual to a branch of the family tree. Daphne, armored in bark, can withstand anything. She puts on like a mantle the position she will be forced to inhabit. Her body becomes raw material from which boards can be shaped for cassone, from which homes can be made, which can be burned for fuel or ground into wood pulp, which you can make into paper, offers a friend of mine. If Apollo breaks a spray for his crown, it is both a mundane act of vegetable violence, simple as tearing a blade of grass, and the mutilation of a body. Daphne remains neither long enough for the act to be truly comfortable or truly disturbing. It is, I think, significant that one of the most common coping mechanisms for dealing with trauma is called compartmentalization. It takes practice to tell a beautiful story, to shape oneself in a situation so as to make something seem natural, normal, so as not to mar how it looks. While an event is occurring, it can feel like there is no precise beginning, middle, or end. It is hard to find the edges to fold, to put it away neatly, but once you know how to do it, how to disassociate from what is happening, a sort of rapture becomes possible. In Bruegel's Landscape with the Fall of Icarus, we see the death from above. We see Icarus partially immersed in the sea, eclipsed by the detail around him. Icarus dies in a landscape where people live and love and push plows. From this distance, that splashing might not even be Icarus, but some other boy who has jumped from the cliffs into the glittering ocean. In Daphne's blank gaze, I see her seeing herself from above, as part of a scene. I see Daphne carried away from what is happening, even as Apollo is reaching towards her. Emily Dickinson wrote, "There is a pain so utter, it swallows substance up, then covers the abyss with trance, so memory can step around, across, upon it, as one within a swoon goes safely, where an open eye would drop him, bone by bone." Or, "Watch me repress," as my friend Molly said with a laugh while turning over some asparagus in a cast iron skillet. It took me years to learn to talk about it. I still cannot remember precisely. I remember settings. One of those early-aught bedrooms, earnestly nostalgic posters on the wall for bands that I can't listen to now, a record player, a mattress on beige carpeting, 2 rectangular skylights. I remember the river and the curly willow tree. I remember what I learned to call beautiful so it could fit into the picture of my life, what I called desire, what I called love. I rewrote my body into impossible things, a building on fire, a buzzing ache in a shoulder, a dog scraping its muzzle until it was raw. I remember his eyes wide, slipping the first edge of a button through the lip of a shirt. I remember him laughing. "Did you want me to light a candle or something?" I remember the veins threading the small pink chapels of his dog's pointed ears. I remember the wind at night, whistling, between the stop sign and its perforated pole. I remember thinking, if one stood rigidly enough, the angle of your position or protest could press any movement around you into a sort of music. I remember deciding not to remember much else. My obsessive aestheticization of and estrangement from my experience made many things endurable. It also allowed me to walk back and forth for years. In the way of such things, its ending was not dramatic, but breakup vernacular. I packed up everything that reminded me of him tightly in boxes and hid those boxes in an attic. They're still there. Years later, my mother was driving me across the river to the city. She woke up well before me, packed my bags and boxes of books into the trunk, and waited, thumbing through the orangey-pink Financial Times. I was settling into the seat when she asked me if I wanted to drop by the coffee shop where he worked, and I stuttered, No, I didn't. And would it be all right if we didn't go back there ever, if we didn't buy anything from there, because please, I didn't think I could drink it, have it in my body anymore. She folded the newspaper. The rain scattered heavily across the windshield, and we watched it for a moment. She said quietly, I thought something like that might have happened. And then, I love you. As I write out these details, more beauty slips over the memory and softens it. She put the key in the ignition. The soft sides of the cardboard boxes she packed shifted against one another. I wondered how many times something like that had happened to her, to others, and how they moved on from it, with it. How many decided they could make it into something simpler, something easier to carry. Thank you.